The small village of Sleepy Hollow lay quietly along the eastern shore of the Hudson River, cloaked in mist and the golden light of fading autumn. To the untrained eye, it seemed like any other quaint town. Houses with steep gables, narrow lanes winding between wooden fences, and the soft bleat of livestock echoing through the fields. But those who had lived there a lifetime knew the truth. Sleepy Hollow was a place where the ordinary brushed against the extraordinary, where whispers of the past lingered like shadows at dusk, and where the imagination of the living often wandered into dangerous territory. Legends were as common in Sleepy Hollow as the falling leaves. Tales of spirits and ghosts were told over hearth fires. In taverns and at church steps, villagers spoke of the Headless Horseman, a fearsome spectre said to roam the roads after nightfall, searching for his lost head, mounted upon a black steed that seemed to gallop without sound. Some claimed to have seen him flicker through the fog, his pumpkin head glowing dimly in the darkness. Others dismissed such stories as childish superstition, a way for weary townsfolk to pass long winter nights. Yet even the skeptics walked a little faster, past the old burial grounds when twilight descended. Sleepy Hollow was a town caught between reality and myth, and it was here that Ichabod Crane arrived one crisp morning. He was a lean, awkward man, with long limbs and an even longer nose, eyes that seemed too large for his face, and a mind equally stretched between ambition and superstition. As the new school teacher, Ichabod was both admired and pitied. He carried books under his arm and dreams in his heart, yet his hunger for success and wealth was as plain as the worn coat on his back. From the first moment he set foot in the village, the air around him seemed thick with potential and danger. The townsfolk whispered about him as he walked the streets. The lanky stranger with curious eyes, the man whose voice could charm children and adults alike. Some watched him with admiration, others with suspicion, sensing the awkward mixture of intelligence and greed that defined his every step. Yet Ichabod paid little mind. He had his eyes on the prize, particularly on one prize, Katrina Van Tassel, the only daughter of a wealthy farmer, known for her beauty, her wit, and the sizable inheritance that accompanied her hand in marriage. To Ichabod, she was more than a charming girl. She was the gateway to a life far beyond his humble beginnings. And so, under the golden haze of autumn, with leaves swirling and a mist curling around the old trees, Ichabod Crane began his journey into Sleepy Hollow, a journey where reality and legend would collide, and where the night itself seemed to whisper warnings that only the foolish dared ignore. For in Sleepy Hollow, some stories were not just tales told for amusement. Some stories were deadly serious. Ichabod Crane's first morning in Sleepy Hollow was crisp, the autumn air swirling through the narrow streets. The village seemed frozen in time. Wooden fences, quaint houses with steep gables, and the faint aroma of burning wood from chimneys. Ichabod walked slowly, taking in every detail. His long legs carried him over uneven cobblestones, eyes scanning the old buildings, mind hungry for knowledge. As the new school teacher, Ichabod had arrived with one goal, a future far richer than his humble beginnings. He was awkward and cunning, a blend of intellect and superstition, fascinated by tales of the supernatural. Where others saw empty streets, he imagined spirits lurking in the shadows. Where others saw simple farmhouses, he saw secrets hidden behind shuttered windows. Every whispered rumor of ghosts thrilled and terrified him. He passed the village church, its wooden steeple reaching skyward, and the tavern with smoke curling from its chimney. Villagers greeted him politely, some with curiosity, others with amusement at the lanky stranger walking with such deliberate care. Ichabod returned nods with polite smiles, calculating how to win favor in Sleepy Hollow, particularly with Katrina Van Tassel, the beautiful daughter of the wealthiest farmer. To him, she represented opportunity, wealth, and a life far beyond his means. On the edge of town lay the old cemetery. Moss-covered gravestones leaned at odd angles. Gnarled trees swayed in the wind, casting strange shadows. Ichabod's pulse quickened. Even ordinary sights seemed charged with ominous energy, as if the village itself harbored secrets. He paused briefly at a fog-shrouded path, muttering a small prayer before moving on. By mid-morning, Ichabod reached the modest schoolhouse, a single room with rough-hewn benches and a fireplace. Curious children gathered, their chatter blending with rustling leaves. Ichabod smiled, adjusting his coat, his voice carrying authority despite his awkwardness. Yet even as he instructed, his thoughts drifted to the village legends, the Headless Horseman, ghostly apparitions, and the path that lay ahead. Every step, every glance, every interaction with villagers offered him knowledge. He observed wealthy homes, planned routes for visits, noted behaviors. His eyes often sought Katrina Van Tassel, imagining the day he might win her favor. The sun climbed higher, illuminating fiery autumn leaves. Sleepy Hollow was more than a village, it was alive with legend and superstition. For Ichabod Crane, the journey had only begun, and soon the shadows of the unknown would tell. Sleepy Hollow was a village alive with whispers and secrets. Its narrow lanes and timber-built houses held more than just residents, they carried stories and the ever-present weight of legend. As Ichabod Crane moved through the streets, he noticed keen eyes following him. Some were curious, others skeptical of the lanky stranger, whose awkward gait made him seem almost ghost-like. Children peered from behind fences, giggling and pointing, while older villagers exchanged knowing glances. They had lived here all their lives and understood its rhythms. The way shadows shifted, gusts of wind seemed alive, and ghost stories drifted through the town like smoke. Every word and gesture seemed charged with hidden meaning to Ichabod. He paused at the general store, a small building with weathered shutters and a bell that jingled when opened. The stout storekeeper greeted him politely, but his eyes were sharp, weighing the man's intentions. Ichabod nodded in return, noting the layout, the goods, and the townsfolk passing by. In his mind, every detail was a clue, every glance a piece of a larger puzzle he intended to solve. Overhearing fragments of conversations, Ichabod's curiosity sharpened. "Did you hear about the Headless Horseman?" a woman whispered. "They say he rides past the old bridge every full moon, searching for his lost head." Ichabod's pulse quickened. These were not tales told for amusement, they were warnings, or perhaps invitations, to those brave or foolish enough to notice. Everywhere he looked, Sleepy Hollow seemed both inviting and threatening. A blacksmith hammered rhythmically, sparks flying, while farmers moved through the fields exchanging nods. Yet in every shadow, Ichabod imagined unseen eyes watching him. The village itself was alive and seemed aware of his presence. At the center of the village, the Van Tassel estate loomed, a grand house with brick walls, tall windows, and a wide porch overlooking gardens stretching to the river. Ichabod's gaze lingered, imagining Katrina Van Tassel walking among the flowers, smiling, unaware of the ambitious teacher observing from afar. He planned, in careful detail, how he would ingratiate himself and win her favor. By the end of his first afternoon, Ichabod had walked every street, observed every household, and gathered more information than he expected. Yet a chill ran down his spine. The village seemed to whisper warnings on the wind. Sleepy Hollow was more than a collection of houses, it was a living story, one Ichabod had stepped into without knowing its dangers. As evening fell, shadows lengthened, curling around corners, settling in his vision. Ichabod Crane, curious and ambitious, did not yet understand that the villagers' eyes were not the only ones watching. Something else lingered, silent, patient, and waiting. As the afternoon sun cast golden light across the village, Ichabod Crane approached the Van Tassel estate. The brick house stood proudly, wide windows reflecting the sky, and gardens stretching toward the riverbank. Ichabod's heart raced, his mind filled with visions of wealth, status, and winning the hand of Katrina Van Tassel, the farmer's only daughter. Katrina appeared on the porch, radiant and lively. Her eyes sparkled, and her laughter carried across the yard. Ichabod paused, adjusting his coat nervously. Every step toward her felt deliberate. She embodied everything he desired: beauty, charm, and a family fortune that could lift him from modest beginnings. Entering the garden, Ichabod took in every detail: the way her dress caught sunlight, the motion of her hair, and the warmth of her smile. His mind raced with plans, conversations, visits, invitations, steps to win her favor. Yet his superstition lingered. Sleepy Hollow was a place alive with legends, and even in daylight, Ichabod imagined spirits, curses, and perhaps the Headless Horseman lurking unseen. The Van Tassel household was lively, filled with relatives, neighbors, and friends. Ichabod greeted them politely, bowing and speaking carefully, displaying both respect and charm. Every glance and gesture was a silent observation. The furniture, decorations, family wealth, and subtle social hierarchy. Each detail mattered, each a clue to navigating this world. Katrina's attention remained the center of his focus. She spoke with warmth, laughter spilling over, while other villagers watched Ichabod's awkward gestures. Brome Bones, the local hero, also moved through the room, his presence a quiet reminder of the rivalry that would grow. Ambition pushed Ichabod forward. Every word and smile was a strategic move. As afternoon waned, Ichabod lingered in the garden, sharing stories of learning, reading, and travels, masking his nervousness. The air seemed charged. Every rustle of leaves, distant village sound, amplified his imagination. By sunset, Ichabod knew he had made an impression, yet a shiver of unease lingered. Sleepy Hollow was alive with stories, some not meant to be ignored. Leaving the estate, his mind brimmed with anticipation, desire, and the faint whisper of the village's legends foretelling strange and eerie events yet to come. The following days in Sleepy Hollow brought a mix of fascination and unease for Ichabod Crane. Each morning, he walked the village streets with purpose, observing every house, path, and detail that might bring him closer to Katrina Van Tassel's favor. Yet with each encounter, a subtle shadow seemed to follow him. The villagers' eyes were sharp, their whispers pointed, and tales of the Headless Horseman lingered in his mind like a faint drumbeat. Brome Bones, the local hero, became increasingly visible in Ichabod's world. Boisterous, strong, and effortlessly charming, Brome was everything Ichabod was not. He laughed easily, moved confidently through the village, and seemed to command attention without effort. Whenever Ichabod looked at Katrina, Brome was near, always smiling, silently daring Ichabod to challenge him. Jealousy and thrill coursed through Ichabod. He knew winning Katrina required more than charm. It demanded cunning, patience, and careful study of both the girl and the villagers. Ichabod's imagination, fueled by superstition, saw shadows and portents where others saw none. The rustling of trees became whispers, lantern flickers, signs. Every nightfall reminded him of ghostly tales and the dreaded Headless Horseman. Sleepy Hollow thrived on legend, and Ichabod's restless mind blurred myth with reality. He walked cautiously after dusk, ears straining for unusual sounds, eyes scanning shadows. Despite tension, Ichabod's ambition pushed him forward. He found excuses to visit the Van Tassel estate, offering lessons, helping with tasks, presenting himself as polite, intelligent, and indispensable. He complimented Katrina with careful words, gestures deliberate, hoping each left a lasting impression. Yet Brome's presence loomed a reminder of social and physical obstacles. Villagers noticed the rivalry, whispering in taverns and at fences, amused by Ichabod's awkward moves and Brome's confident ease. Ichabod catalogued every remark and gesture, storing the information like a strategist preparing for a game. Each small victory, Katrina's smile, a brief word, a polite nod was a step forward in his plan. But Sleepy Hollow was not a village where ambition went unchallenged. At night, wind carried eerie sounds, branches scraping windows, distant hooves, shadows that seemed to move independently. Ichabod's imagination turned them into warnings, signs that the village itself watched him. Each day brought opportunities, each evening new anxieties. By the end of the week, Ichabod realized his time in Sleepy Hollow was a balance of desire, fear, and strategy. Katrina's charm and wealth were within reach, but the path was perilous, filled with rivals, legends, and unknown forces that could turn ambition into misfortune. Every step counted, every glance was observed, and every shadow might shape his fate. Ichabod Crane had entered a world where every story whispered or lived could alter his destiny. Ichabod Crane's visits to the Van Tassel estate became more frequent. He always found excuses, lessons for the younger children, errands, even simple walks past the gardens. Each time, his eyes searched for Katrina. She laughed brightly, teased with gentle words, and carried herself with a playful grace that both invited and unsettled him. To Ichabod, every smile was a promise, every glance a secret sign. He studied her closely, convinced she favored him more than she let on. Yet he also knew another man watched her just as intently. Bones. Where Ichabod's manner was careful and nervous, Brahms was bold and easy. He courted Katrina with loud jokes, daring horseback rides, and laughter that drew the whole village's attention. People gathered at fences and doorways, delighted by the rivalry unfolding before them. The contest was no secret. Sleepy Hollow thrived on gossip, and talk of Katrina's to admirers spread quickly. Some praised Ichabod for his learning and polite ways, while others laughed at his awkward gestures. Brome, however, enjoyed broad admiration for his strength, pranks, and fearless spirit. His popularity gave him an advantage Ichabod could not ignore. Still, Ichabod pressed forward with quiet strategy. He lingered after lessons, spoke with studied politeness, and imagined futures where he was master of the Van Tassel estate. In his mind, Katrina's hand meant wealth, status, and escape from his modest life. Each soft word from her fed these dreams, though doubt often gnawed at him. For every hopeful glance, there was Brown's mocking presence. At night, Ichabod's imagination betrayed him. The valley was steeped in ghost tales, and none haunted him more than the Headless Horseman. Travelers swore they had seen the phantom rider racing through the dark. Ichabod, eager and nervous, listened too closely to every tale. After leaving the Van Tassel house at dusk, he sometimes thought the trees leaned toward him, their branches like grasping hands, the wind carrying whispers of hoofbeats in the distance. Bones, sly and mischievous, fed these fears. Around fireplaces, he retold the legend of the horseman with relish, painting scenes of midnight rides and vanished travelers. Villagers roared with laughter at Ichabod's pale reactions, while Katrina sometimes hid a smile behind her hand. The rivalry was no longer just a matter of charm. It had become a test of pride, wit, and courage, fought in daylight with glances and in twilight with ghost stories. Ichabod, however, would not yield. He reminded himself daily that ambition demanded patience and superstition must not master him. Yet, even as he tried to steady his mind, the shadows of Sleepy Hollow grew longer. Rivalry, legend, and unseen forces seemed to weave together, pulling him toward a fate he could neither predict nor escape. The rivalry between Ichabod Crane and Bones grew stronger each day. Ichabod studied Katrina's gestures, glances, and smiles, interpreting her playful words as signs of affection. Brahms' bold confidence overshadowed him everywhere. With boisterous laughter, daring stunts, or effortless jokes, Brome drew the attention Ichabod desperately sought. Villagers watched with amusement, whispering and laughing at the awkward schoolteacher's attempts to impress. Ichabod tried to outmaneuver Brome with careful strategy. He lingered after lessons, helped the Van Tassel family politely, and spoke with refined courtesy. Each smile from Katrina, each word of thanks, felt like a small victory. Yet Brahms' presence was constant, a reminder of the obstacles Ichabod could not ignore. Brahms' charm, strength, and popularity made the competition far more difficult than Ichabod had imagined. Sleepy Hollow itself seemed to feed Ichabod's unease. At twilight, the trees cast long, clawing shadows, and the wind carried faint whispers that sounded like warnings. Tales of the Headless Horseman haunted his thoughts. Stories from travelers, villagers' gossip, and even children's hints fueled his imagination. Rustling leaves became footsteps. Flickering lanterns became ghostly eyes. Ichabod felt the village itself was alive, watching him, testing his courage. Despite the fear, Ichabod pressed forward. Ambition would not allow him to yield. He planned conversations, gestures, and actions meticulously, treating each encounter like a strategic move. He imagined winning Katrina's hand and securing wealth and security. Yet with every step toward this goal, the shadows of Sleepy Hollow seemed to stretch farther, and Brahms' presence grew more daunting. The villagers' amusement never ceased. At fences, doorways, and taverns, they observed the rivalry with keen interest. Some admired Ichabod's intelligence and persistence. Others laughed at his awkwardness compared to Brahm's easy charm. Even Katrina, kind and attentive, seemed aware of the contest, smiling in ways that encouraged and confused Ichabod. As dusk fell, Ichabod's fears deepened. The wind carried ominous sounds. The river whispered over rocks, and shadows seemed to move on their own. He could not ignore the stories he had heard. The Headless Horseman, restless spirits, and the unexplainable events of Sleepy Hollow. Yet ambition and desire for Katrina pushed him onward. Caught between hope and fear, love and rivalry, ambition and superstition, Ichabod Crane moved carefully. Sleepy Hollow's streets, villagers, and legends formed a web around him. And each choice could tip the balance between success and disaster. With Brome Bones watching, Katrina inspiring, and shadows lurking. Every step mattered, and a single misstep might seal his fate. Autumn deepened, covering Sleepy Hollow in gold and fading green. The Van Tassel family announced a grand gathering, a celebration of harvest with music, food, and dancing. For Ichabod Crane, it was the moment he had long awaited. He imagined arriving with poise, winning Katrina's attention before the entire village, and proving himself a worthy suitor. The dream filled him with equal parts hope and nerves. When evening came, lanterns glowed along the path to the Van Tassel estate. The house, already stately, blazed with warmth. Horses were tied at fences, laughter spilled into the night, and villagers entered with joy. Ichabod approached in his best attire, rehearsing every polite phrase. Crossing the threshold, he was greeted by the swirl of music, fiddles and flutes, carrying lively tunes that set feet in motion. Katrina shone brightest of all. Her gown glimmered in the lamplight, her smile drawing every eye. Ichabod bowed deeply, showering her with compliments, his long frame awkward yet determined. She received him kindly, her laughter ringing like music, and for a moment, he felt fortune leaning in his favor. But Brome Bones was not far. He strode in with his usual swagger, his broad shoulders and booming laugh filling the hall. Villagers cheered his arrival, and soon he had Katrina by the hand, leading her across the floor with effortless charm. They danced boldly, spinning to applause. Ichabod's heart clenched, yet his ambition refused to yield. He hovered close, seeking chances to reclaim her attention. The feast that followed was rich and heavy, roasted meats, steaming bread, and pies whose scent carried through the hall. Ichabod ate eagerly, though his thoughts lingered on Katrina. He imagined the estate as his own, each candlelit room belonging to him through her hand, but doubt gnawed at him every glance toward. Katrina was met with Brahm's laughter echoing louder than his own timid words. As the meal ended, stories began. Old men leaned by the fire, their voices low, recounting legends of the Headless Horseman. Music faded, laughter quieted, and the crowd leaned in. Ichabod, though curious, turned pale at each tale. Travelers disappearing, a rider with no head galloping through moonlit woods, spirits haunting lonely paths. Brome, seizing the moment, added chilling detail, pursuits through the hollow, phantom hoofbeats pounding the night. Villagers roared with laughter, some at the story, others at Ichabod's trembling look. Though embarrassed, Ichabod could not stop listening. Each tale wrapped tighter around him, feeding both dread and fascination. The party sparkled with warmth and joy, yet in his mind, the shadows beyond the lanterns thickened. Sleepy Hollow's ghost seemed nearer than ever, waiting in the darkness for him to step outside. The Van Tassel gathering carried on with merriment late into the night. Music rose again after the ghost stories, though the tales lingered like shadows in the corners of the hall. Ichabod laughed nervously, his imagination restless. When he looked at Katrina, she smiled politely, her meaning unreadable. To him, it was both a promise and a puzzle, urging him to linger even as the hour grew late. Brome Bones thrived among the villagers. His laughter boomed, his stories rolled, and all eyes turned toward him. He reveled in the attention, casting smug glances at Ichabod. To Brome, the rivalry was sport. To Ichabod, it was a contest that decided his very future. Every flicker of Katrina's gaze felt like a prize, and each of Brahm's loud laughs rang like a warning. At last the evening began to fade. Families prepared to leave, lanterns lifted. Horses stamped outside in the chill night air. The stars glittered sharp above, fields shimmered silver under the moon. Ichabod lingered, waiting for a final word with Katrina. He hoped for affection, something that might outweigh Brahm's boldness. What passed between them is uncertain. Some later claimed Katrina listened politely, giving little. Others whispered her look carried mischief, as though she had only toyed with his hopes. Whatever the truth, Ichabod left the house with a troubled heart. His dream of triumph seemed shaken, though not yet gone. He mounted his bony steed, Gunpowder, and rode into the night. The path wound through silent fields, moonlight casting long silver shadows across the ground. Every rustle, every stirring branch, pricked his nerves. The headless horseman's tales rang in his mind, the restless rider, the phantom galloping through the hollow, forever searching. The farther he rode, the heavier the silence pressed. The glow of the Van Tassel home vanished, replaced by still countryside. The dark church steeple rose in the distance, stark against the stars, a beacon of safety, yet also of legend. Ichabod urged Gunpowder forward, his lanky frame swaying uneasily in the saddle. Shadows stretched across the road, twisting into strange shapes. A frog croaked from a marsh, startling him. The wind through cornfields hissed like whispered warnings. Each hollow thud of Gunpowder's hooves echoed, as though pursued by unseen steps. Still, Ichabod pressed onward. Ambition urged him on, but fear clung to him like a cloak. The legends of Sleepy Hollow seemed to ride beside him, unseen but close. Ahead lay the forest path, narrow and dark. With each breath, Ichabod felt the night draw tighter, as though preparing for something he could neither name nor escape. The night deepened as Ichabod pressed along the road. Gunpowder's hooves echoing hollowly on the packed earth. The fields gave way to darker ground, where tall trees arched overhead like a cathedral of shadow. Moonlight broke through in slivers, casting shifting shapes across the path. Each gust stirred branches, and every sound seemed magnified in the stillness. Ichabod's mind replayed the tales told hours before. The headless horseman rider without a head, doomed to wander, seeking one to claim. He tried to steady himself with reason, whispering that stories were only superstition, but his voice trembled. The rustle of leaves, the crack of twigs, every sigh of wind seemed proof that spirits stirred near. Gunpowder plodded uneasily, ears flicking at unseen things. The horse, like his rider, was spooked, shying at shadows. Ichabod urged him onward with nervous words, but fear pressed heavy on them both. The forest closed tighter, fog creeping over the ground, swallowing the road's edges. An ancient tree loomed, its trunk gnarled, its branches stretched like arms. For a moment Ichabod imagined them bending to seize him. He struck Gunpowder's flank in panic, and the horse stumbled, nearly throwing him. Before regaining its step, the silence became unbearable. He strained to listen, and sounds came, distant rustling, faint hoofbeats that might have been echoes of his own, or something more. Ichabod twisted in the saddle, eyes wide, but saw only fog shifting between trunks. Still, the sound persisted, steady, deliberate, as if another rider followed just beyond sight. Sweat gathered on his brow despite the chill. His imagination filled the darkness with images of the horseman, a headless figure astride a black steed, waiting to strike. Ichabod urged Gunpowder faster. The hooves rang louder, yet the echo pursued, matching his pace, never fading. Ahead rose the great tulip tree at the crossroads, a place whispered of in local legend. Many swore it was haunted, a meeting ground of spirits. As Ichabod neared, the shadows thickened, the path twisting beneath Gunpowder's hooves. His heart pounded as he glanced left and right. Certain eyes watched from the dark. For a moment the sounds fell silent. He dared to hope it had been imagination alone. Yet even as relief flickered, a darker shape stirred beneath the tulip tree, broad, mounted, still. The figure sat in silence, as though waiting. Ichabod froze in the saddle, breath caught in his throat. The forest seemed to hold itself still, the air heavy with dread. Every story, every warning, every laugh of Brom Bones rushed back to him at once. Before him stretched only black road, behind him the echoes of fear. The shadow remained, silent and solid, unmoving but undeniable. Ichabod's heart hammered. He had reached the very heart of Sleepy Hollow's legend, and it was no longer just a tale. Ichabod's heart pounded as he fixed his gaze on the figure beneath the tulip tree. The shape was broad, mounted on a powerful steed, silent as stone. Moonlight glimmered faintly along its outline, yet its shoulders were bare. There was no head. For a long moment, the forest held its breath. Gunpowder shifted uneasily, snorting at the still air. Ichabod swallowed and forced himself to speak. "Who goes there?" His voice cracked, trembling as it echoed into the night. No answer. The rider gave no sign of life. It sat motionless, dark and terrible, as though it had grown out of the tree itself. Ichabod's skin crawled. The stories returned to him in a rush. The Headless Horseman, haunting these roads, riding forth from his grave in search of the head. He nudged Gunpowder forward, desperate to pass. The horse crept closer, hooves dull against the road. Still the figure remained fixed, silent. But when Ichabod came abreast of it, the shadow stirred. The massive horse shifted, and the rider straightened. Slowly, without a word, it turned and began to ride beside him. A chill swept through Ichabod's veins. He urged Gunpowder onward. To his horror, the phantom matched every stride. Its silence was worse than a cry. He stole glances, but each confirmed the dreadful truth. The rider had no head upon its shoulders. Reason deserted him. "It is a trick of the night," he whispered, but the words rang hollow. The figure rode in perfect silence, no greeting, no sound of breath, only the dreadful pounding of hooves. Ichabod pressed Gunpowder faster, from trot to canter to gallop. Sparks flew from the road, but still the dark horseman kept even pace. Panic rose until he could barely breathe. Then hope flickered. He remembered the old bridge at Sleepy Hollow. The tales claimed the horseman's power ended at the stream, that no spirit could cross running water. If he could reach it, he might be safe. With new desperation, he spurred Gunpowder on. The horse surged forward, mane whipping, nostrils flaring. The forest seemed to close behind them, the night alive with the relentless thunder of pursuit. Branches whipped across his face as the path twisted. His eyes strained through the gloom until at last he glimpsed the faint arch of the bridge ahead, pale in the moonlight. Salvation? Yet the rider pressed closer. Ichabod dared a final glance and froze. The phantom had drawn level. In its hand it carried something round, dark, and terrible. It was a head. Ichabod clung to Gunpowder's mane, the horse lunging forward with the last of its strength. Behind him thundered the phantom rider, relentless and silent. The pounding of hooves filled the night like war drums, closer with every stride. The road twisted through dark thickets, branches whipping Ichabod's face as he ducked low. Terror gave him strength, his thoughts fixed on one hope: the bridge at Sleepy Hollow. The tales said the horseman's power ended there, that spirits could not cross running water. Gunpowder stumbled, nearly throwing him, but Ichabod wrenched the reins, forcing the horse upright. He dared not slow, dared not glance back, though the phantom's presence pressed on him like a storm. The sound of the pursuing steed grew louder, shaking the earth beneath his heels. Then the trees broke. Ahead gleamed the pale arch of the bridge, shining faintly in moonlight. Relief surged through Ichabod's chest. If he could reach it, he might yet live. "On, Gunpowder, on!" he cried, striking the horse into a desperate burst of speed. They thundered onto the bridge, the planks rattling wildly under their charge. Ichabod's heart leapt with frantic hope. He had crossed. Surely the phantom would vanish now, banished to the shadows. He risked a glance behind. The rider had not stopped. The great black horse surged onto the bridge, the figure rising in the saddle. In its hand it lifted the object Ichabod had dreaded, the ghastly head. With dreadful force, the horseman hurled it. The dark shape spun through the air and struck Ichabod full in the face. He pitched from the saddle, crashing to the ground, lantern shattering, hat tumbling into the night. The world went black. Gunpowder, freed of its rider, galloped off into the dark, reins trailing. The thunder of phantom hooves faded, leaving the hollow silent. The moonlight fell cold on the bridge, the river whispering below, carrying away the last sound of pursuit. By morning, villagers found the ground trampled, Ichabod's hat crushed in the dirt, and beside it a shattered pumpkin. Of the schoolmaster himself, there was no trace. Some swore he had been taken by the Headless Horseman. Others whispered he had fled, too ashamed to face Katrina or the mocking laughter of Brome Bones. And Brome, whenever the tale was told, only chuckled and winked, though he spoke no word. Yet the bridge remained, and so did the fear. Travelers claimed they still heard phantom hoofbeats on the planks at night, and some swore they saw a headless rider vanish into the trees. In Sleepy Hollow, the legend lived on. Morning came pale and misty over Sleepy Hollow. The sun crept through the trees, revealing the aftermath of the terror that had visited the night. Villagers emerged cautiously, whispers trailing their steps. The once lively forest road lay silent, save for the faint rustle of leaves. The bridge drew first attention. Ichabod's hat lay crushed among the shattered planks of a lantern. Beside it, remnants of a pumpkin darkened and broken spoke silently of the night's horror. The trampled ground told a tale of desperate flight, hoofprints running wild along the road. No one saw Ichabod. Some claimed he had been spirited away by the Headless Horseman, carried to parts unknown. Others said he had fled in terror, abandoning the hollow forever, pride too wounded to return. Brome Bones appeared calm, a faint, knowing smile upon his face, though he offered no explanation. Children whispered of the horseman in hushed voices. Travelers passing at night reported phantom hoofbeats, chills of unseen breath, or glimpses of a dark figure vanishing into the woods. The story spread quickly, adding yet another layer to Sleepy Hollow's legend. Weeks later, villagers debated the truth. Some insisted Ichabod had hidden in fear, clever enough to escape. Others swore the horseman had claimed him, leaving only signs behind to remind the living of his power. Katrina Van Tassel moved on, her charms undimmed. Yet a hush accompanied tales of that night. Brome Bones chuckled at curious questions, casting sly glances toward the hollow, as if he alone knew the truth. Despite uncertainty, the legend endured. Sleepy Hollow itself seemed changed, the air carrying caution and dread. Travelers approached the bridge with nervous steps, aware that shadows might move unexpectedly. Even skeptics shivered when the wind stirred the branches above. As years passed, the tale of Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman became inseparable from Sleepy Hollow. Every autumn, when trees shed leaves and the moon rose pale, whispers returned. Villagers spoke of the dark rider and the fateful night at the bridge, reminding all that some legends are never gone. Though Ichabod was gone where, none could say the hollow remained alive with memory and terror. Sleepy Hollow kept its secrets, its shadows, and its stories, waiting for the next traveler brave or foolish enough to test the road at night. Years passed in Sleepy Hollow, yet the tale of Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman never faded. Travelers along the old roads at night whispered of shadowed trees, echoing hoofbeats, and the feeling of unseen eyes. Some claimed to see a dark figure vanish among branches, a silhouette against the silver moon. The bridge remained, a silent witness to that fateful night. Crushed hat, shattered pumpkin, and trampled ground were gone, yet memory lingered. Villagers spoke of the events with awe and fear, each retelling adding layers to the legend. Parents warned children not to wander the hollow after dark, and even skeptics shivered when wind stirred the leaves. Katrina Van Tassel lived on, her charms unchanged, but she never forgot the lanky schoolmaster who had sought her hand. Brome Bones married her eventually, and he never laughed louder than when Ichabod's disappearance was mentioned. Whether he knew the truth or had orchestrated a trick remained a secret. Sleepy Hollow itself seemed alive with memory. Every autumn, when leaves fell and the moon rose pale, whispers returned. Travelers spoke of cold gusts that felt like breath, distant hoofbeats along empty roads. The shadow of the Headless Horseman persisted, woven into the town itself. Though Ichabod Crane was gone, the story endured. Some said he had fled, haunted by pride and fear. Others swore he had been taken by the phantom, carried into eternity. Either way, Sleepy Hollow remembered him, and through him, the horseman's terror lived on. The legend became inseparable from the hollow. Each year, new visitors tested the roads, daring to walk paths that had captured imaginations before. Tales were told anew of a dark rider, a headless figure, and the night terror rode across the bridge. In Sleepy Hollow, the shadows, the whispers, and the stories never faded. Travelers, villagers, and children learned a simple truth. Some legends are eternal, and some roads should never be taken alone at night. The hollow waited patiently, ready to remind the living that the night has its secrets, and some secrets have teeth.